today's show, you won't believe it, I've got the one and only, he's a good friend of mine, Mark Burge. I really want to call you Mark Burge. Yeah, that's what I'll be using. So Mark, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Okay.
Right, so we're going to start. I have to give a disclaimer here. First of all, Mark is a wonderful individual, but when you listen to his accent, you might think he sounds like a radio DJ sometimes, because there's this mid-Atlantic thing going on, which we are going to explain in a minute.
Sure.
But what we're going to do first of all is, where did you start training in martial arts?
Boy, a while ago. I guess back home in Durrington, I think I was around 8 and I started judo.
Right.
So did judo for probably, through whatever middle school for maybe a year, not too long. Enough to get a taste of it, but then, wasn't really for me, that whole competitive edge. And, I remember getting my first, couple of yellow stripes on my belt and stuff, but that was tough. That was an eye-opener. So.
Any grappling art is hard, because you can hide in the striking art and you can get lucky.
Yeah.
But nobody's ever lucky when it comes to wrestling.
Well, at that age too, it's tough. So.
Yeah, I actually quite like it. I think for children, I think it's very good for social association, and get people away from being on the Xbox and into reacting, but where you're physically getting into it. So then what happened? You had a break, and then what happened?
Took a break from there, and then around kind of comprehensive school, so maybe 15, 16, that period, I did Taekwondo. So under WTF affiliated, so I would go up to London and test in front of Master Riki Ha.
Right.
So, so that was kind of intimidating going up there and all the way to London and testing, but that was fun. So, I mean, again, all my friends at that age were doing it, and there's a lot of adrenaline flying at that age, so you want to hit stuff.
It's a good play. It's actually a good way to get an outlet for all of that energy, right? What a lot of people don't realise is people knock Taekwondo, right? I think it's a good art. What I like, if they do it correctly and they do the patterns, they do the forms, and they do the destruction. I think you've got everything, and especially for today's society, I think it's a bit more of a genteel. No disrespect to anyone if you're a Taekwondo guy, right? But it's a little bit more of a genteel way of doing the training, because you get all the movement.
And it was interesting at that time because there was like the ITF and the WTF. Yeah. And we were on the side where it was minimal pads. You'd have like a foot pad, maybe a shin guard, some mitts, but no head protection, no chest protection. And it was supposed to be light touch, which as well as I do. It's How to get your nose broken, do non-contact karate. Yep. Because that's how it always works.
Yeah, you see, what I found was when it went into Seoul, Korea as a demonstration art, it completely changed, because you had guys playing TIG with each other, and like these guys they had all the protection in the world. And I know it's an Olympic sport, but archery is an Olympic sport. Right? And I know it's a skilled sport, but they don't even hurt animals in it. They shoot targets. But what people don't understand is just how big that is. How many people would be when you were testing, when you were going down there?
Oh, hundreds. And the thing is with the rules, you weren't allowed to show the soles of your feet, so you had to sit with your legs crossed, and we'd be there for 3-4 hours, even before you got called up to test. And so then you just try not to cramp up and screw up your forms or anything else. So it was tough.
But this is the thing. How did you? I'm going to jump forward a little bit, because to go in sort of a real dogmatic way of training, that in lines, don't make eye contact, don't you dare speak to the master, and then you come into like a freewheeling world that we're in now.
Right.
Two ends of a spectrum, isn't it? Right.
Well, and it's a journey. I mean, your life changes. I got married, had a couple of kids. Realized that this idea of doing crazy high spinning, flying back kicks was those days are behind me. And so for me, it was a natural progression. Once I moved to the US, which was about 17 years ago, I was looking for something new at that point. So I discovered a very good school, Twin Cities Aikido, and studied Aikido for 6 years.
I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Really?
So and that was fantastic again, but then, life changed and I had to stop going to that school. So then, again, just I want to experience all the arts. So, to me, it's all one art. There's just different aspects that you're learning at any one time.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of done the Korean, done the Japanese. So then I did Chinese. So I did long form Tai Chi, so Yang style.
Wow.
Studied that for about a year and a half, just enough to get the form down. Again, then had a couple of kids. That was the point I had my kids, so I took a break to.
Do you still do the Tai Chi?
No. Those again, it's interesting because it's so good. The thing that was most eye-opening about Tai Chi for me was you look around the room and there's a whole bunch of, range of ages. Some people in their 20s, some people all the way up into their 90s, and they're doing this beautiful art. They're just moving, very slow. And I'm doing it, and I'm just sweating. I'm pouring with sweat, and I'm shaking, and I'm just like, what's going on here? This is crazy. Well, and what it was is, you realize, imagine trying to take a step, but now do that as slow as you possibly can.
Yeah.
You transfer weight to one leg, and then you're on one leg for a good 5-10 seconds. Slow, but you're doing that for the entire form. It is a workout, more of a workout than I expected.
Guru Danny No Santo always says, if you can't do it slow,
right,
you can't do it fast.
Yep.
And it's that whole understanding of how it works. So what was it that drew you to Tai Chi? Just something you were interested in?
Yeah, something different. Again, and I knew there was a combat aspect to it. And again, a very good school up in Minneapolis and some great instructors there. And so, they're very traditional in how they teach it. So if you want to learn any of the kind of cooler stuff, you have to do the long form Yang style and show that you're committed before you can start doing pushing hands or bagua or any of the other Chinese arts.
Well, there's a good friend of mine, Anthony Rushton. He's like, he's awesome. Yeah, he's a really good martial artist, and he does the bagua. And he says, as I say, I'll show my ignorance. I remember years ago, you'd see like Haizing Ai.
Yes.
It's Ching He, right?
Yep.
And you see it, and it was like James McNeil, right? And I got myself into a bit of trouble, and I don't want Will's eyebrows to raise now, but no, I actually got into a bit of an internet war with one guy because he was saying that, I'm not knocking it, I'm showing my ignorance here a little bit, but a guy said to me, he said that, the internal arts are so powerful, and he said, if we put Sifu McNeil into the UFC, he'd be devastating, even at 60 years of age. And I was like, based on what? I said, I'm not trying to be contentious, but what? And he said, he can crush a watermelon with his bare hands. So, of course, don't say something like to me, come on. So he did it, and I said, right, okay, so apart from being like in the watermelon division of the UFC, what else? And then he actually called me a mere roustabout and a slobberdigullion. And I was like, I just heard long words, and I was thinking, this sounds fucking awesome. What is this? Google it. Right. Slobberdigullion isn't a great thing to call another human being. Mm-hmm. Basically, he said I was a mere scrapper. But it was just showing my lack of understanding, because I still bang, you see.
Yeah.
And I don't ever foresee a time where I don't want to kick Thai pads and go crazy. Right. So now this is going to lead me on to this, right? So you did a load of martial arts while you were in the UK. How aware were you of who Rick Fay was?
Well, that was the thing. So then I basically had my kids.
Yeah.
Took a break again to raise a couple of boys, and then put on the weight, all the rest of it. Started going, all right, now they're kind of self-sufficient. I need to find something to do, and again, sort of turned to martial arts. That's always been my passion. So from there, I started looking around, and I was like, well, I kind of done the Korean thing, done Chinese, done Japanese, what else is out there? And I'm like, wow, there's always been this weird two-stick martial art thing that kind of looks really cool. And lucky enough, right there in town was Rick Fay. So I basically started Kali at that point. I've been there ever since.
Well, you see, this is the one thing. It's only the guys. A lot of the guys in the Kali group now, if they've been there for more than 2 years, they get it. Mm-hmm. Especially if they spend the summer and then they see a load of guys coming in from around the world.
Right.
But like a real dear friend of mine, Kurt Cornwell, Kurt went there. He moved to Minneapolis to train with Rick, and he came to a summer camp, and I was literally probably the third person that actually sat down and had a conversation with him. And I was just basically, we were sitting around a campfire, and I just said to him, and that literally isn't a euphemism. We were sitting around a campfire at the corner, on the edge of Lake Owen, And I said, you guys are so lucky. I said, I spend all year saving up to do this for 10 days. And I said, you've got this on your doorstep. And then years later, Kurt turned around to me and he said, Mick, I'd packed my car. I did the first day at camp and I was like, I am so fucking lost. I can never. So he was about to drive.
Right.
And like, you know, so the thing is, like, he's now married to like Amarai, a wonderful girl. And he always says, yeah, great people, right? And he said, I was going to go. And he goes, it was you that talked me into it. Yeah. And it was, because a lot of people don't realise, you know, when you got something that good on your doorstep. Yeah. I always say this, you know, about the whole thing in, you know, with LA. I understand that a lot of people who train with Guru Dan realise how good he is. But I'm not, and contempt's a strong word, because it isn't familiarity breeds contempt. But when you get used to having somebody on your doorstep, you know, it's like the loyal wife scenario, isn't it? You sometimes forget just how awesome that person is.
You take him for granted,
right?
exactly.
So when did you start in the Kali?
Well, I actually started with one of Rick's other instructors, Mike Asher at MKG West.
Oh, Mike. Yeah, I know Mike Asher. Yeah, Haunted Brain Productions, if you're still going, right? That's him. Yeah. Mike's a great guy. Yeah, so how did you say, was it, I'm trying to think, what was that? Was it MKG West?
MKG West,
yeah.
Yeah, so Westside Cities, which is where I was. So started there, you know, obviously started picking up all of the arts, JKD, Kali, you know, Muay Thai. So did there for about 2 years, and then unfortunately we closed. And so then when we closed, I moved over to Rick's main studio.
And how long did it take you to get there?
So I've been probably in Kali around 5 or 6 years. So, you know, probably about 3 or 4 with Rick, and then another 2 before that. So.
Okay. So this is going to lead me on to something, because anybody who watches this knows I'm intrigued by. I love America. I think America's like the boldest social experiment we'll ever see. And it's the truth, right? Yeah. So, you know, there's one reason I love New York so much. I love New York because you've got this melting pot of 24 square miles of everything in the world shoved in to one place. And then you got, like, you know, you got the highest levels and you got the lowest levels, right? And people always judge America, especially in the UK, off a TV show or, you know, right now it's like Donald Trump's going to be a president. And we look at it and we go, that's like Alan Sugar going to be the prime minister. Personally, I think he'd be more successful than Cameron, but that's a different story. But what it is, like, living in the Midwest, I quite like is, I always like Minneapolis, because Minneapolis is one of the coolest places in the world now to live. That's what they did a poll. They did
one of the healthiest.
Yeah, one of the healthiest as well. And it's got one of the highest literacy rates in America. So it always helps when people can read. You know, I think that's a really good starting point to be able to educate yourself. Right. But as a British guy living in America, right? So you can see both sides of this, right? I'm trying to work out how you can explain one of the things that you teach is what we were talking about.
Oh yes, I do teach firearms. So you know how to shoot pistol, rifle, shotgun, carbine. I work for a good friend of mine, Quorum Security. My buddy Eric runs it, and how that came about was we were actually playing airsoft, which is, you know, similar to paintball. Yep. And he's ex-military and also ex-police, and he was training under a gentleman called John Farnham, who's also world-renowned for in training firearms. And John challenged him to go out and become an instructor. So he started becoming an instructor, and then all of his immediate group of friends became the first round of students, and I was one of those. Right. And so then as we've stayed with him, now we've progressed, and now we're all instructors under Eric. So
yep, you see, this is the thing, right? For the UK mindset, the Second Amendment just don't get it, right?
Right.
But just as a British guy living in America, try and explain why it's such an important part. Because I always say it's so ingrained in the American psyche.
I mean, I think it is, but there's always two sides to every argument.
Yeah.
You know, so there's always people for, and there's always people against, and it's the same in America. There's, you know, a large group of people that, you know, don't believe we need firearms for any reason, and then there's the other, you know, Second Amendment people, or people who want to protect themselves, the family, who are like, no, I should have, this is a right, it's an inherent right to the country.
I love this, you know. our mutual teacher Rick Fay always says it shouldn't just be the bad guys who have guns, right? So, and in the UK, we're trying to judge a situation based on what we know, and it's culturally, you know, as I've said before,
part of the culture. So,
and it is in there. And
well, I mean, just in Minneapolis, I mean, and across the US, I mean, hunting is still alive. I mean, there are many people that will hunt, and that meat they'll use that throughout the year. I mean, that's, you know, part of how they live.
Yeah,
I mean,
can you explain this? Because I don't know this, and this actually wasn't anything I was going to ask you. But when you go hunting, you can get these tags. So, and basically, these tags, do they enable you to like get so many?
They permit you certain animals, and again, it has to be in the right season. So you can't just go take an animal any time you want.
It's the old Yogi Bear. The Yogi Bear acts like an absolute animal until it's bear season, and then he keeps his head down, right?
Exactly. And the thing is, it's about population control, because, you know, again, a lot of the native carnivores and stuff have been eradicated. You know, so we don't have a lot of bear. They've reintroduced wolves. And so, you know, the like deer populations are probably the most common, or most that people think of.
But you see, this is the thing, right? And when people look at deer, they think of Bambi, right? Until they realise that a road traffic accident that wipes out a whole family.
Yeah.
Because we have this thing where, you know, it's quite bizarre. We try and put on human characteristics on an animal and not realise, you know, a hyena is a badass, right? A coyote is a badass. A bear is a cannibal. You shoot a bear, right, and you don't go and pick that bear up. You go back in half an hour's time, and his family are eating him. You know, because it's the truth, right? And people can't work this out. And it was like with the hunting one, it was something that really, yeah, the more I looked into it, like Mark McFan is the Mark McFan would like literally, he has like thousands of pounds of elk meat, and you're like, yeah, are you prepping like for the apocalypse or something? He goes, no, because I need this during the winter time.
Yeah.
So, as a British guy, teaching firearms, I know the answer because we've talked about it before. You've mentioned to me before, there's literally two types of people that own guns, right? And there's the responsible ones. And when you talk about them, this is my argument all the time, because I always say this, you know, another dear friend of ours, Ty Campos, this guy is a complete clown, one of the funniest men on the planet, but around firearms, completely different. Yeah. And it's I'd like you to explain the level of responsibility that you see.
Well, and again, it's always a sliding scale. And so, you know, there's always, you know, going to be stupid people doing stupid things. And you can't, unfortunately, prevent that. You know, you can hopefully do education and training, which is what we help provide. But, you know, you can have somebody who, you know, is not taking... I mean, it's like any tool. You know, you don't leave your power tools around your kids. It's the same thing for any weapon, whether it's a sharp knife, a gun, or anything. There's certain obvious things you don't do. And so, I mean, if you're going to do that, then you got to expect bad repercussions sooner or later. And so... But even within, you know, the people then that have taken the step above that, there's still education and things. You know, I mean, we see, you know, a lot of women who go purchase a gun, but then they'll just sit the gun in their handbag. Well, one, it can be hard to get to if you actually need to. And two, is it actually in a holster? Is it protected? Or is it just loose in with all of those other items? Well, the gun can still go off if something, you know, gets in the trigger guard. So there's still areas you can educate people to say, okay, this is a better way of, you know, handling a gun, a more safer way, and, you know, help teach them, you know, those skills.
Well, you see this thing, right? We talked about this yesterday, and because I asked you, I was fascinated how a British guy could get, because I can imagine, right, some guy's there and he's listening to country and western his whole life, and he's like, yeah, man, America will go. And then for a British guy to go over there and understand that it's part of the culture, and say, right, okay, I need to understand this.
Well, and the thing is going through, I mean, I actually shot in England. I was actually a shooter in England. Right. I started small bore at college, and then progressed to a police pistol competition just locally. And so I was actually a shooter before guns were banned in the UK. And so for me, moving to America, it was actually less jarring because I already kind of was
Yeah.
part of that culture. Maybe
Yeah.
not to the extent that it's accepted, because it's certainly not as accepted here,
No.
that it is in the US. But it was less of a transaction for me.
Yeah, well, I've said this before. Yeah, I've said this before about Minnesota. Yeah, everyone's Minnesota nice, and people say it and they think like, yeah, it's like a backhanded compliment sometimes by a few people, right?
Yeah.
And they don't realise how nice and polite nearly every Minnesotan is. Personally, I think it's 4 months of the year being locked up in the house. You know, you guys. You know what? For those other 8 months, I might not see you guys. You know what I mean? But there's that, and then the other one that I've always maintained is everybody that I know, especially from the Kali group that I really like, all of them shoot. You know, you'll get someone like Diana Rathborn, who is like a deadeye. You know, she's an awesome shooter. And as I said, Diana's a great example of martial arts right there. She looks like a hockey mom, and she'll kick your ass with any utensil, and then you give her a gun, and I swear to God, she's like Jason Bourne's sister. Like, am I right? Yeah.
Yep.
But what I've noticed in Minneapolis is everybody is polite, and I always say, because you don't know if that old lady has got a gun or not. So do you know what? Just a nice little bit of social level up.
And I think Rick, said it best in one of our training sessions. It's like, if you're kind of acting like big man on campus, if you're changing your behavior because you're carrying a knife or carrying a gun, then you probably shouldn't be doing that.
You shouldn't do it. No, exactly, because one of the things that I liked when you were talking about, that you saw there was a not a gap in the market, but there was a void, and it was a glaring void from buying it to, God forbid, ever using it.
Yeah.
And it was that grey area. And the minute you said it, I looked at it, and because I always say about martial arts is a fairy tale. And if you're looking at this and you wear pajamas, it is a fairy tale, because it's like everybody knows the once upon a time, and everyone hopes about the happily ever after. So people know how to get into a fight, and they hope that the happily ever after is them coming out, right? And it's the bit in the middle. It's like the seven dwarfs. It's the, this porridge is too hot, or it's too hot, or it's just right.
And you don't know.
But they don't know, but they're prepared to go from here and here and not have anything
right.
to avoid.
Well, and the thing is like, especially as a concealed carry holder, you're much more aware of your behavior because you now have a weapon on your hip. Without the weapon, you might be like, all right, yeah, we're going to go, but now I got a gun on my hip. That changes things, because now if we get into it and it doesn't go as well as I'd hoped and I end up shooting you, that's
life's changed.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's definitely an aspect where I can't say modify your behavior. You become, actually, in a way, you become a better person.
Yeah, well, you see this, you're saying something that, I'm 100% with, because I remember the first time I met Ty, and we went to camp and we had a great time, and then we were training at the Kali group, and he said, "You want to go out tomorrow night? We'll just get a few beers." And I was like, "Yeah, no worries." He goes, "Give me a minute, I've got to go to the gun locker." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah." And it's like, you got a gun, but you can't leave it in the car, but you're going out now and you don't want to put it anywhere, so you have to put it in this place. So, and I was like, dude, I can't believe it. Like Mike Duffy's the same, because he was like, we're going shopping, and he goes, "Just give me a minute," and he has this Beretta and he's putting it, and I went, "Where are we going shopping? The Gaza Strip. Why do we need this?" He goes, "Well, where we have to go through."
Right.
And he said, "It's not that." He goes, "I'd rather have it here than be worried about it." Right? If you can quickly explain what is the license to carry, because this is for the guys who are watching for the UK, right?
Right.
Me, I think if you've got a gun, trust me, this is why I shouldn't be allowed to have guns, because I look at it, I want to be Emilio Estevez in Young Gun, and I want to have it here, and maybe another one here, and I want to make you famous and stuff.
Right.
But people can do that, but is it a higher level to be able to carry it as a concealed weapon?
Actually not. I mean,
really?
I mean, you obviously have to go through a background check. You can't be, a felon or anything like that. So, and it still has to be approved by like your local sheriff's office. So, I mean, there's still a whole bunch of paperwork that you got to go through, and then you actually have to be certified by, a concealed carry instructor. And so you have to do a course. And so, like I said, my friend Eric, I really like his course because he really stresses the legal aspects, the legal repercussions of carrying a gun. let alone if you actually have to draw it on somebody. You know, what the fact of, you know, expect a police response. This is probably what's going to happen. You're probably going to spend the night in jail, even if it was justified. So really, and we've had people go through that and come out and go, carrying a gun's not for me.
Really?
You know, because they realize what the true responsibility of that is. And I mean, it's purely a responsibility. I mean, it's down to you, you know.
But this is it, right? Just to, I wanted to talk about martial arts, but I found what you were doing more fascinating, and you know, we covered the martial art aspect, but if you train with a lot of American guys, they will tell you that martial arts. Yeah, Mark McFadden, I know Rick considers firearms the logical progression for projectile weapons, right? So the 4 rules. I was going to do this is from my friend John Dornick, right? Because John Dornick always goes out. He goes, "Let me tell you the 5 rules to using power tools," right? Yeah, which I thought it was quite. Yeah. But there's 4 rules. What it's 4 rules for guns.
Yeah. You're gonna put me on the spot now. I got to remember.
But there's only one that really gets me, which is never point it at something. So never point at something you're not willing to destroy.
Correct.
And the minute I heard that, like, I was like looking at, you know, when people say, I was like, guns are cool. Yeah. And then Ty was saying, always assumed it was loaded.
That's the thing. You always treat a weapon as loaded.
Yeah, but I don't know if you ever heard this story. Trust me, I grow up with these, and they've never been real to me. Even when we had a shotgun in Ireland, it was never loaded.
Right.
And you know, my grandfather had it. Used to shoot some rabbits. I shot it a bit, but you know, you look and you have a quick look. But what I didn't realise was you have to make everybody aware, the 3-time thing, and of course, Ryan Reynolds has got this shotgun, gives it to me, and I'm looking at Rick and I'm saying, this thing's awesome. And I wasn't aiming at anybody, but I ran it across the room. They went fucking ballistic.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, whoa, what's the matter, guys? And like Ty was like, yeah, like I'm telling you, like Rick was like, he was pissed with me, but there was a few guys that were like,
yeah,
dude, we need to speak. And I was like, but it wasn't loaded. You gave it to me, and I asked if it was loaded. And they went, you have to assume it's loaded.
Yeah.
And they went, when you do that, we can't take the risk.
Yeah.
And I was like, but you saw it open, and they were like,
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So.
Yeah, and that gives you an idea of the level of responsibility.
Well, and it really is, because, you know, it's the one time. You know, how many times you driving in your car and you check your mirrors, but you don't really check them. You're like looking, and then you make the turn, and you're like, oh shit, somebody's there. Same thing. You know, it's that familiarity breeds contempt. You get so familiar with handling whatever the tool is that you just start taking it for granted. You know, same with knives. I mean, how many times you end up cutting yourself because you're like futzing around with something you shouldn't be. So.
But this is going to lead me to my final point, right? I remember the first time I went over to Minneapolis, and Rick was teaching, and there was a mutual friend of ours, Tim Hanks, he's a badass, right? So I was saying, well, what would you do? How do you work with this gun? And he said, first thing I have to teach you is how to be able to keep hold of it. And I'd be like, easy, I'll just point it at somebody and kill them. And he went, no, it doesn't work like that. Yeah. And he told me about how important it was. And then the minute he explained it to me, that was when I immediately turned around and went, we do not need to have armed police in the UK. Because, you know, the amount of police that train at the Cardi Group, all of them are badasses. All of those guys you would and girls you'd never want to fight with. And then in the UK, you know, you lazy bastards need to work. You need to work out more. So if you're a copper and you're watching this, go to the gym. But it's like they're not ready for the fight. And it like just because you got the weapon, that doesn't differentiate between who's going to use it, right?
Well, and again, and then there's, you know, the whole. I mean, you know, it's all over the news with, you know, whatever turmoil between cops and you know, different people. And the issue is like, you know, with the state of litigation in the US, I mean, cops have it worse than anyone about their choice of option when they're dealing with somebody. You know, they have to be very careful about choosing the appropriate level of force. More so in a way than a civilian. You know, civilian, you can be like, okay, well, you know, if you meet certain criteria, you can go to deadly force. But for a cop, that's a much tougher choice to make. And especially in a split second, you know, when it's dark and you're some guy running at you or something.
Too. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's a lot of variables, and so for them, it's in many ways it's a lot harder.
Yeah, well, you see, this is the one. And he is a friend of ours, so I won't mention who he is. And he was teaching this clearance drill with a shotgun, and you hit the hip, elbow, run across, and go in, right? And I was like, man, that is so cool. I said, but why don't you go centre mass? He goes, because if I kill him, that's $1 million that the state have to pay. He goes, if I just shoot his hip out, he'll live, and we can't give him any more than $15,000. And the minute he said it, I was like, and we're talking, this guy's on about, I see somebody go in there and tell this guy how to fight in a bar, and you're talking about a guy who's prepared to blow somebody's leg off to save a lot of money, and you're like, yeah, it's a different league. Yeah. But first of all, it's been a pleasure chatting to you. I love the fact that it's just a unique position you're in as an English guy to live there, and apart from the winters, Minneapolis has got to be great to live in, right?
Oh, it is.
The winter's not too bad.
No, I mean it's cold, but it's not like, I mean, in many ways, for me, England's colder. I know it sounds odd, but that combination of being cold and wet, those days when it's cold, rain, and there's a wind and it's cutting right through you.
Yeah,
that's pretty rough. Minnesota, it's clear and sunny. It's just really cold, so it's bearable.
I'll tell you something. When you look at it, those Native Americans must have been tough, because the only people who live in Minneapolis are Norwegians, Scandinavians, some Irish, like in St. Paul. You guys are crazy. I don't know what you're doing there. Irish in St. Paul. Yeah. And like my personal favourite, and we're going to end on this, is the amount of Somalian taxi drivers, right? And you know what? I just love it, because I would love to have seen those guys on their first winter, because they would have been like, am I like on Hoth? You know what I mean? Like that. Well, wait a minute. What time does the Empire turn up? Is Vader going to be here? Because that must have killed them, eh?
Yeah, totally different.
Oh man, Mark, thank you so much for your time. Thank you very much.
Anytime.
Check this guy out if you're in Minneapolis.